Okay, who do you want me to talk about? You might not know the guy is John Clare, a poet of the late 18th, early 19th century, wrote many of his great poems in a lunatic asylum, and you possibly know the other person. Make a choice. Yeah. Okay, I'll start with Gilly, and we'll perhaps get on to John Clare. I was working in a drug and alcohol rehabilitation centre and reading The Winter's Tale by Shakespeare aloud over many weeks, months, with a group of people who are recovering from drug and alcohol addictions. The Winter's Tale, if you don't know it, is a great play for people who have wrecked their own lives. The leading character has wrecked his own life and then has to live with the consequences for 16 years until bits of it come back to him. So it's a powerful play for that setting. In the group was a young woman who wasn't a very good reader, probably would be deemed not literate. And there was also a very senior professional person, highly literate, probably 2 or 3 degrees. They were joined by their relation to addiction, these two people. And in between that, many others. An older lady who literally couldn't read at all, an ex-Marine who could read but never had, and so on and so forth. And we were reading aloud. So at the beginning, most of the time, I'm reading aloud and doing all the voices as best as I can until some brave member of the group says one week, "Oh, go on, I'll do a bit for you," kindly. And until eventually the woman who I started with, who was not a very good reader, said, we came up to the point where the shepherd appears, and I said, you know, he's got to be a country accent, and she was from Devon. And so she said, I'll read it then, because I got that kind of bumpkin accent. And she started reading, but she couldn't read it. So she wanted to read it, but she just couldn't manage all the apostrophes where the letters were missed off. And the soldier leaned over, put his hand on one bit of it and said, "That's ant, just say ant." She said ant, she read the next word, got stuck again, put his finger on, read another word, and so we went on through her sentence. And then she sat back and said, "I've read Shakespeare." And she was well pleased with that, and so was he, because he probably hasn't helped anybody for quite a long time, that guy. Anyway, this lady, let me call her Clara, came in a little while later and said to me, months later, it's Valentine's Day. She says, Valentine's Day, isn't it? Bad day for me. I said, for many of us. She said, yeah, but I got married on Valentine's Day and now I'm divorced. Sorry, it was funny. She meant every time Valentine's Day comes round, I've got to remember that. So she said, it was very hard, it's very hard for me. And I said, how do you get through it then? She said, well, all day long I just want to drink. How do you not drink? She said, well, in the past I just drink. I don't not drink, I drink. But this time, I thought, I'll read that book my mum got me from the Oxfam shop. Her mum, knowing she'd come to this reading group at the centre, had bought her a copy of Gilly Cooper, thinking our Clara might enjoy that. She said, so all morning I just sat there wanting to drink, thinking bloody Valentine's Day, and concentrating on Gilly Cooper, got through it till 2 o'clock, got here in the afternoon. That's my story about Gilly Cooper. A writer, can I whisper it? Don't feel me saying this. I didn't rate her. Sorry. But do I rate her ability to keep Clara away from drink on Valentine's Day? I bloody do. In that reading group, we don't read Gilly Cooper, we read Shakespeare. And Clara reads Shakespeare. In her own life, she has become a reader. And I don't care what she's reading in her own life. I just want her reading. I want to tell you a little bit about the John Clare now. The Reader started many years ago when I was a university teacher of literature, and I come from a family of alcoholism. That's why I was working in the centre. I'm very interested in the problem of addiction. I have personal experience of it in a big way. And however, I had grown up, established myself as an adult person, and eventually was working in the university teaching English literature and running an evening class. Very serious young woman as I was, one of the students said, "Christmas, can we have a party?" And I said, "Party? It's course. We don't have a party, we study literature." And the students all said, "Oh, please, please, party, party. We'll all bring a poem." So I said, "Oh, okay, party." I'm the daughter of alcoholics. I don't want a party. Bring the poems. Everyone will read them out. So the party was quite nice. People read their favourite poems out. And a lady in that class who I would describe as looking like the Vice-Chancellor's secretary, dressing like the Vice-Chancellor's secretary, educated perhaps in the same way as the Vice-Chancellor's secretary, professional woman, read out the poem I'm going to read you by John Clare. I am, yet what I am, none cares or knows. My friends forsake me, like a memory lost. I am the self-consumer of my woes. They rise and vanish in oblivious host, like shadows in love's frenzied, stifled throes, and yet I am, and live like vapours tossed into the nothingness of scorn and noise. I'll stop there. She read this poem out to the party pooper and the party goers, and there was a long, long silence at the end of her reading, and someone said to her, "Why'd you like that poem, Val?" Picture her, probably look a bit tinier than me, but that's what I look like now. Said, well, years ago, I was a street alcoholic in Melbourne, Australia, and I'd lost everything, my family, my children, the farm. Kicking around the streets of Melbourne, I had that poem with me and would take it out and read it from time to time. And it seemed to be part of how I eventually stopped being a street alcoholic. So you can imagine the 17 people in that classroom were all pretty bowled over and surprised and moved by her story. And I, in particular, who was teaching adult continuing education at the university, was almost overcome by that story. I'd known the poem as a piece of English literature. I hadn't thought of it as a lifebelt, psychic lifebelt, which is what she was describing. Into the living sea of waking dreams where there is neither sense of life or joys, but the vast shipwreck of my life's esteems. I just really wanted to bring that poem, perhaps to pose a question while we're talking about imagination and well-being, because I don't think we know what reading is or what it does. I think that's in both of the cases I've given, it's easier with the Jilly Cooper example to say it gave concentration, it gave you a focal point, it gave you a world, a place, other people, somewhere to go that wasn't drinking. But with a poem like this, and I would proudly say a piece of great literature, a phrase for which I am very often taken to task. Why does it have to be great? Why can't it be popular? Well, it can, at home, once you're a reader. But when we're reading together, I want to choose things that are going to get people, as a young woman in a prison group said, in the gut. That was Charles Bukowski's poem, Bluebird. Bluebird. There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out. But I don't let him. I pour whiskey on him and cigarette smoke. Got me in the gut. I want that to happen. And I'm sorry to say, most of the time, that don't happen with Jilly Cooper. So say great literature, why not? Let's not be ashamed of it. Does something marvellous, as your man this morning was talking about meaning in life and the need of very deep engagement. So I left the university and went out into the wilderness to set up groups where people could read together. And reading aloud is how we do it. So as your guy said, he did digital downloads of audiobooks, but we do the live experience so that you don't have to be able to read. You don't have to be able to read at all, or you don't have to be able to read very well. But we will be reading Shakespeare or John Clare or many, many other great works of literature, including probably picture books. I Want My Hat Back by John Classen. If you don't own it, go and buy it. Interested in violence? You'll love it. Read it in prison. George Saunders, short stories, full of violence, sex, swearing, drugs, and everything else that's going on in prisons. Goes down a bomb. It's great writing. Takes you to places. Where is my meaning? So someone will read aloud in the group. Others may chip in and help. That person who's doing the reading in the first place will be a trained reader leader, encouraging others, however well or not so well, they to join in. And there'll be a lot of talk. So we might stay for an hour on the self-consumer of my woes. Meaning what? Am I just going over and over and over and over and over my troubles? The lady who's making the knitted, the woven wool back there, asking us to think of gratitude and saying to me earlier, we have an imbalance. We think more negative thoughts than we do positive. Is that what you're doing when you're a self-consumer of your woes? For me, often it is. So we might stay there and talk about it, you might disagree, etc. If it's a very moving, big session, someone will talk about the vast shipwreck. A police officer out of the force now on health grounds who never recovered from a murder case he was in. He might talk about that. Might not be the day, the week, the month. No one will make him. He'll choose to if he wishes. But without John Clare's sentence and powerful, vast shipwreck writing, we're not going to get to that point. We need the good stuff to provoke the feeling that then will provoke the conversation. When I started, it was just me in a broken down library in Birkenhead trying to get professional people I knew to refer adults who were not into reading to my group. Nowadays, the Reader is a large organisation with 100 and odd staff members and 850 volunteers. We run 500, at the moment, 500 weekly read aloud groups. And 33 of those are in prison or probation or secure mental health settings. There are lots of other settings, and I'm particularly keen to tell you about it today because we've worked a little bit in Sheffield through the Sheffield Care Trust, some volunteers over there, but we've just got some money from the Arts Council to start to recruit some people in Sheffield. We're going to be looking very, very soon for volunteers to start community reading, shared reading groups. So I'll want to talk to you about how to do that. A lovely thing to add on, and really that your man from the university needs to know about, because quite a few people I've spoken to today say listening to audiobooks is not reading. And I think that's right, and I think it's something to do partly with the visual absorption of text, which may be paper or screen. But yesterday I saw a presentation from a publisher, Egmont Publishing, look them up, they're great research, where they're keen on ebooks, but they were definitely saying small children even, the age of 8, are saying they get more satisfaction from paper books than from digital reading. It's a different experience. Do something else with your digital. I thought I'd say a little word about impact. For many years, the Reader had professional staff who were people like me who'd worked in universities or taught English or were manic reading obsessives. But over the last, quite a long time, but particularly over the last 2 years, we've really worked to shift this to a volunteer model. I want to build a movement that is like guiding and scouting. Guiding and scouting is held up, let me say guiding, by 500,000 people, young women and girls who go to groups every week, and by 100,000 adults who make those groups and the support structure of those groups work. I don't know if any of you have been involved in guiding or scouting, but that's their system. And then they've got 100 staff. So 500,000 members of groups, 100 staff. That's my dream. And for that you need crazy people who are willing to turn up to the shed round the back of the church every Tuesday at 6 o'clock for years. Because that's how they do it. They just love it and it's a big part of their life. I don't want the groups to last for 6 weeks. Sometimes it has to be like that. I just want them to be there forever, like pubs are, like churches. You can go in if you want. So we started looking at, is there an impact on volunteers as well as the readers themselves? And the volunteer stats are fantastic. Not all the volunteers are people who would identify as having any kind of well-being issue, but 94% of them say shared reading sessions made them feel better. That's a lot. There'll be other people who came home that day saying they hated the John Clare poem and I couldn't get them talking. And they all sat there looking angry and wanting Jilly Cooper. Ugh, bad week. But you'll see most of the impacts I'm putting forward there are about social connections, because that's the big one. As I think the earlier research showed us, social connectivity is key to good well-being. We've got lots of other information and reports, and we've done quite a lot of research, and you'll find a lot of the research on my partner organisation, CRIL's Centre for Research into Reading, Literature and Society at the University of Liverpool. My husband Phil works there, my colleague Josie Billington been doing research into shared reading for 10 years, so look it up. to me. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. Hi, thanks. It's really interesting. Thanks so much. I just wonder what your experiences of working with volunteers and participants who don't have English as a first language, or have very much English.
Yeah. The experience is it's a good way for people to practice speaking English together in multi-groups. So certainly we've worked in Tower Hamlets quite a lot, and worked at the Ideas store, the library there on the High Street, which is a massively diverse community. Or in Liverpool, in the Asylum Link Refugee Centre. People don't speak the same language. You can have 15 people around a table and 15 languages. So we're reading in English. In Tower Hamlets, in fact, they developed a Somali language-based reading group, but there are very, very few texts in Somalian. It's an oral culture. So there are lots of complications about that. Don't know what else can happen. Interested to see.
I might have one. I've kind of missed a little bit, so forgive me if you repeated it already. Just when it comes to doing your reading groups, like how do you get people of varied ages involved, like at the beginning? Especially if you're halfway through the year and you've already been doing these reading sessions. Can people just wander through the door, or is there a process?
No, generally if they're open community groups, they're open all the time and anybody can wander in at any point. Sometimes in closed settings it's different, so it might be in a residential drug rehab, it's a fixed group, or in a prison it might be a fixed group for some of the reasons you described. But most of our groups are open community groups and anybody can go. What tends to happen is two things. Sometimes volunteers stick to reading short stories or poems or extracts so that each session is a standalone session. And you can think, if you just came for this day, something would happen and it'd be okay. Others will be doing a novel, and so, if that's a big fat novel, you could be in a 15-month project, reading aloud very slowly, talking about it. It could take a very long time. Imagine An Equal Music, read aloud very slowly with lots of talking. It's a big fat book. Or Middlemarch, Anna Karenina, nearly 2 years worth. So you've got to be ready to just let people walk through the door and say to them, right, it's Anna Karenina. We're just up to the part where they've broken off their love affair, he knows about it, and there's a bloke over there who's ordering champagne. Dive in. And members of the group will love to do that. Can you sum it up? Okay, have a go.
Oh, can I add to that just really quickly? I was in a workshop recently, and there was this young girl. I was in a library, and she said, I asked her if she wanted to join in the reading, and she said no. And the main reason she said, because when they were studying at school, she actually found it irritating having to wait for someone to read. So I was just wondering, how do you combat that for people who just like the more fast-paced reading?
That is also a real problem for people who are well-established readers. I can't remember what my own stat was, but let's say, could you click back to the last one? So we had 3,000, and if you count the volunteers, say 3,100, no, 4,000, isn't it? 4,000 people reading every week. Many of those people will not be established readers. Most of our readers are people who haven't read books before. So it's all the same in a way if you're that person at the very beginning of your reading journey. But for people we do meet who are mad keen readers, at first it's very frustrating because reading aloud is the difference is between, say, driving in a car from here to Sheffield Station or walking. It's that much speed difference. It's 6 times, 7 times slower than reading in your head. The beauty of that is, as you do when you're walking, you notice loads of things because it's so slow. Trees, nice berries on that bush, etc. You see a lot. I think for people like you and me, perhaps, who are very fast solitary readers, that is a gear change you have to really adjust to. People do find it frustrating. I would say worth it. Okay.